All right, folks, we're going to wrap up Chapter 6 here with our data modeling checklist. And I'm going to flip over here to Word so I don't have to try and handwrite all that stuff. There's not going to be as much drawing going on here. So this is sort of the end of the design portion. We've done 6 chapters. Actually, we skipped the 5th one. We've talked about essentially 5 chapters on how we design databases. I guess we had a little bit on database concepts, but again, using that, looking at models, we've been going through a lot of this. So this is kind of the wrap up until we actually get into doing databases for real. So we're going to wrap up this abstract portion here and move into some real stuff coming up next week, where we get to start to have a lot of fun actually poking around doing real things. So this is kind of our last little checklist on this abstract portion. And I'm grabbing my pen here like I want to keep writing things. But mainly what we need to look for is our business rules. Maybe we have this iterative design process where we need to talk with people, we need to build some models, and then go talk to them again and say, hey, did our models capture everything that you needed? Sometimes our implementation models are going to look a little funny. And if we try and give them all the details here and show them a picture, they might get a little bit confused. But generally, people can kind of follow the picture. And we can show them, hey, this is where we're storing all these little pieces of data here. The relationships they might not get because they haven't spent 5 weeks talking about this. But work through those business rules, figure out what are the data requirements for them. Right? Make sure that we know what the entities are. Right? Our entities, our attributes, our relationships, and any constraints, right? That's the constraints. I can't talk and type at the same time, apparently. So this is, hey, what are the rules around the data here? Do they have specific forms that we need to follow? That sort of thing. And make sure we have it all written down. Make sure we know this is how the data is going to work here to make sure we can get this right. Then when it comes to the modeling process, right, we need to make sure we have good entity names. Those are our nouns, our tables. Right? Make sure that the business understands what they are. We're not using abbreviations. We're not using anything short. We want nice, meaningful names here. And then anything that is composite, right, where we have multiple entities, or we're doing this joining process, need to figure out a good name for it. Sometimes those are hard to come up with. Right? I think we had employee and certification and certificates, right, and then maybe a certification table, because you could get a certification for a given certificate. Some of them are hard, and that's okay. We'll do our best with those, or maybe it's just employees certificates is the name of that joining table here. That's fine. For our attributes, right? Again, we want nice, unique names here. I'm not a fan of the entity as a prefix. The book says go for it. Again, just whatever wherever organization you end up at, follow their convention for it. But you want descriptive names here. So you need to know what the attribute represents for. And you want to make sure that we have, when we talk about relationships in our models, right, that we are kind of describing what the nature of the relationship is. They're typically verbs, right? So you would enroll in a class. That's the action that you do in it. So look for how we can describe it in the names. All right, and then specifically around entities, we need to make sure that this is for a single object, right? So an instance or a row in that table should represent a single object, right? We want to make sure that we have third normal form. Again, that's the ideal. We don't always get there. Sometimes we need to do some of that denormalizing for performance reasons. But again, that's the goal, and if we're not, then we need to know why. We need to really understand why, and we need to understand the granularity of the data. And there's probably no T there. Granularity of the data, right? And we need to have clear primary keys to make sure we know, okay, this is the right level of detail that I need here for this. For our attributes, we want to make sure we are atomic. Right, that's a single valued, single item. Right, it's as small as we can get. Single value. Oh my goodness, I just can't type right now. Right, we need to make sure we know if there are any constraints for the given values. And that's the domain. What are the possible values here? What should they be? Whether or not we have anything that is derived. values. Right? If we're going to be deriving some information from here, great. We need to have controlled redundancy. Again, using foreign keys to reference primary keys, great. Not a problem here. That's a controlled redundancy. That idea of having that historical accuracy is a controlled redundancy. So I'm taking the price so that I know what the price is when I sold it, or when I bought it, or when whenever I'm charging you for it. We need to make sure we have the history there. And then again, we're looking for that dependency on our primary key. We're getting that if we're in third normal form, but it's just one more chance to make sure we're looking for all attributes are dependent on the primary key. Dependent on the primary key. And really that's all non-key attributes, sure, right? Anything else there. For our relationships, right, we want to make sure that we understand the participants and the participation in the relationship, right? Is this an optional participation? Is it mandatory? Right? Well, how are we doing this here? What sort of connectivity and what sort of cardinality do we have between these? Right? Is it one to many? Is it many? The many to many conceptually is fine. We'll break those down to one to many, but how many are we going to have here? And is it optional for those? And then when we actually start doing our model, right, our ER model itself, we want to make sure that we know the model itself needs to be succinct, right? We don't want to just keep adding and adding and adding and adding and adding so many fields. We need to add the right fields to store the right data for our business users, the stuff that makes sense for us to store. We need to make sure that, again, this controlled redundancy idea here comes up again, and make sure we don't have any redundant relationships. So another chance to evaluate relationships. Make sure that, yes, that we have the correct relationships between our entities here. And then that's about it for our checklist. We have gotten through multiple chapters now of working about how we conceptually look at data in a database without actually having done any data yet. So we'll do one last exercise, one last discussion this week on trying to identify some of these and solve some of these problems conceptually. And then next week we'll move into actually working with data. It gets to be a whole lot more fun, I promise. So looking forward to moving on, and you folks are doing great. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you. Take care.